In this lecture, we're going to learn how to output raw HTML. Before we jump into the code, I want to take a moment to talk about some security issues that may arise from doing this. The security risk I'm talking about is called cross-site scripting. You may also hear it referred to as XSS. Cross-site scripting occurs when malicious or harmful HTML is injected into the web page, causing unintended behavior in the application. This usually happens when you output HTML from an external data source. For most of this course, we've been dealing with basic data. None of it contained HTML. The HTML was left inside the template. However, there will be scenarios where the HTML will come from the data source rather than the template. In these cases, you open yourself up to cross-site scripting. This is because your data will not be hard-coded like we've been doing so far. Your data will most likely come from an external source, such as a database or API. If those sources are compromised, your application will most likely face issues too. Before we go any deeper into this topic, let's learn how to output raw HTML. Previously, we inserted a link into the template with a dynamic URL. Let's recreate this, but with the HTML mixed in with the data. Inside the data object, we're going to create a property named raw URL. The value will be an anchor element with the URL pointing to Google. Then, inside the template, we'll create another pair of paragraph tags. We'll create an expression inside the tags for the raw URL data property. This expression will not work. Let's see why. Go ahead and refresh the page. Vue will process the expression. However, it will not render the HTML correctly. It'll get escaped, resulting in it being rendered as raw text. This is great in most scenarios. It means that if the data was compromised, then the worst a user will experience is a broken app rather than a malicious one. Now let's say I wanted to output the HTML unescaped. What then? We can render HTML from a data property by using a directive. Back inside the template, we're going to remove the expression. Next, we'll apply the v-HTML directive to the paragraph tag. The v-HTML directive will allow us to output unescaped HTML. The value of this directive is an expression. We'll set it to the raw URL data property. Let's give the application a test by refreshing the page. If we did everything correctly, the link will appear like the one above. We will be able to click on it. This is great. Thanks to the v-HTML directive, we're able to output raw HTML onto the document. Let's circle back for a moment. I want to take a moment to discuss the security risks with outputting raw HTML. There is a reason why Vue will only output data as raw text. It's because it's a safer solution. Let's pretend that a hacker suddenly gained access to the database where the URLs are stored. If they saw we had raw HTML rendering on the page, they could change the links to harmful sites. What would that look like? In the developer tools, we'll open the console. We're going to access the VM object, which contains our Vue instance. We will change the raw URL data property from Google to Bing like so. If I press enter, you'll see that nothing changes above. It's because I didn't change the inner text of the link. I only changed the link itself to use Bing instead of Google. If I were to click on the link, I'd be taken to Bing, which isn't what we wanted. This is one example of cross-site scripting. One common method for hijacking an application is done by convincing users to copy-paste code into their consoles. This will give them access to the data in the application. While the user is at fault in this scenario, we don't want our data to contain raw HTML. We should take precautions to ensure the application doesn't output anything we don't intend it to output. There are usually better solutions for handling raw HTML. You need to consider those solutions whenever you have to output HTML carefully. I want to give some final thoughts on this before we move on. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do to prevent cross-site scripting on the front end. Vue already does a good job of keeping us covered by only outputting raw text from expressions. However, that can't solve every scenario. Nowadays, there are browser extensions that modify the HTML on a page. Users may have these extensions installed. There's not much we can do about it. There are two things we can do, though. A lot of the responsibility falls on the back-end developer as they have full control over what gets inserted into the database. As long as they're securing their side, it makes our job so much easier. If you're developing on the back end, make sure you're sanitizing and escaping any HTML that goes in and out. Our duty, as front-end developers, is to escape characters. Vue helps us with that. Secondly, make sure you trust the source of your data. Most APIs available are safe, but always make sure you know what kind of data you're receiving and expecting. As long as the back end of things are secure, your front-end application will be safe.